this morning, those visiting from other congregations as well. Sister Carmen and her children are here with us, so good to see her as well. If for a moment, if you will, the men, after the brothers, for just a moment, meet with us after the assembly, just for a few moments. The men, if you would, come down front. We're going to make it real quick. So just please come on down front so we can get it done and be done. In the book of Matthew, chapter 22, there is a question that is asked of Jesus about the greatest commandment. The question is what's the greatest commandment? And Jesus would respond to this lawyer that come from among the Pharisees that was testing him. We find this Matthew 22, 34 through 40, for those of you that may want the cross-reference. Matthew 22, the verse 34 through 40. A lawyer testing him, tempting him, asking him about the greatest commandment in the law. And Jesus would say, the greatest commandment is this: to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your spirit, your mind, your strength. You owe God your all. And he said there's an equivalent command, one that is equal to this one that is like this one. And that is, you are to love your neighbor as your own self. And he says, upon these two commandments depend the whole law. I want you to just think about that for a moment as we begin to make our segue into the text that we're going to analyze briefly on this morning, as we continue to operate under the heading this month of faith, family, and fellowship. Faith, family, and fellowship. We sought to point out that the community of Christ from the book of Acts chapter 2, it's a community where everybody is involved in saving one another. Everybody is active in the saving process. When he says, save yourselves from this corrupt generation or this untoward generation, he was not saying to each individual to merely be concerned about yourself. He was speaking to the whole community, the whole church community, and he's telling them, y'all need to be involved in saving yourselves from this corrupt generation. We dealt with that a couple weeks ago in a lesson titled A Soul-Filled Church is a Spirit-Filled Church. We learned from that text that the way a congregation embraces the activity and the movement of the Spirit is if that congregation continues in the apostles' doctrine, the fellowship, the breaking of the bread, and the prayers. We looked at some of the cases in the book of Acts showing anytime you see the kingdom expanding or the body being built or strengthened, one or all of those elements were present. What elements are you speaking of, brother? I am speaking of the elements that are revealed in Acts chapter 2. They continued in the teaching, they continued in the fellowship, the breaking of the bread, and the prayers. Whenever those elements were present, then you see kingdom expansion, you see body being built. There will never be an expansion or a building without those four elements. Does that make sense? And so that's what we see set forth as the biblical model. And when they understood the message of the gospel, when they understood the work, I want to give that emphasis, the work of the person of Jesus. Remember, Luke begins this second volume called the book of Acts by saying to Theophilus, in the former treatise that I gave to you, I told you about everything that Jesus began to do and to teach. And that same model of doing and teaching is embraced by his community and acted out within the community and outside of the community. We know that they were internally going from house to house, continuing in the doctrine, the fellowship, the breaking of the bread, and the prayers. And as a result of those daily activities, what we find is a whole world seeing them praising God, and as a result, they were attractive rather, to all the other nations. Does that make sense? And that stuff still works. It still works. And so we dealt with that. Now, I want to deal with this person of the Christ. Now, Jesus teaches something that I think we need to readdress, if not briefly. Everything we do begins with this premise: love God, love man. If that is not our motivation, whatever else we do means nothing. It could be a religious activity, but if it's not moved by a healthy love for God and a healthy love for my fellow man, it's all for nothing. Does that make sense? As we move, I want you to think with me. So that's what Jesus taught. Does anybody question Jesus' love for his Father and his Father's children? Can anybody question that? Can anybody question his loyalty to the Lord and his loyalty to the Lord's creation? Can anybody question that? He actually lived what he taught. I want you to chew on that. The Hebrew writer describes him as the author and perfecter of our faith. In other words, he is the model. He is the prototype. He is the one to be mimicked. He is the one to be imitated. Just want you to think about that. Jesus taught a lesson he lived. Love God, love neighbor. Nobody can question that. And in giving an example of how one should live out a life of faith, he gives a list of several human beings. But he gives the ultimate prototype. He gives the Christ. He is the example of loving God and man. John is careful to point out in 1 John 3:18, we didn't get to this text this morning, but I want to give it to you now. John says this: love, not in word and tongue, but in deed and truth. Love not in word or tongue. What are you saying? It does me no good. It gets me nowhere. But by telling my wife I love her and then dragging her across the floor. My word doesn't match my behavior. Now, I know some women have said he do it because he loved me. That's a lie. That's a lie. My words, my behavior has to match my word. Has to. No need, John says this in same text, same chapter 3. No need in saying, and what's interesting, John actually uses all of his doctrine, he pulls it out of one person, the one that was from the beginning, that we've heard, we've seen, we've touched. I say these things to you that you may have joy and fellowship with us and God and his Son. This is written. I am writing this to you so that you may. He goes through the whole book with that thought. This is why I'm writing. This is why I am saying what I'm saying. And in communicating, we talked about this last week, the great magnificent love of God that is seen in the action he accomplished through the person of Jesus Christ by acting out the love. He says to Christians, don't just love in word and tongue. Let your love be seen. Just like you see God's love through the person of Jesus, let Jesus motivate your love. He laid down his life for you, and so we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. You see that? The very thing he preached and taught, he did. He's not just speaking it, he's doing it. Does that make sense? And so we come to this text. We come to this text. I want you to think with me for a moment in Hebrews 2. Hebrews 2. That's just groundwork. I want you to at least know something about the book of Hebrew before we move forward. I mean, there's a lot I want to say I will not have time to disclose, but I will but say this. It is described in chapter 12, 22, 13, that this is a word of exhortation. We've seen it. This is how he describes the letter, the document. It's a word of encouragement and challenge. Why do they need to be encouraged, and why do they need to be challenged? They need to be challenged because they are seeking to leave Christ. And I'm just going to summarize all of this. They're seeking to leave him because Christianity has gotten hard. They need to be encouraged. They need to be challenged. You need to be challenged to know that if you leave him, you have no hope. You need to be encouraged to know that he provides you hope. And he uses Jesus as the model of faithfulness that they are to model. And he does something to me that is fascinating. But it only is fascinating when you are familiar with a few other things that have taken place in Hebrew history as it relates to God's promises, as it relates to God's purpose. And he begins to make a case, and he makes this case, and the case is this, that when God created, everything he created, he gave to man. Everything he made, he gave it and put it under man's control. Man was designed to be a king with his God, but he lost it. Now, that may not sting because there's a lot more information you need to actually feel the impact of that and what it is that should have resulted in man's failure. He lost all of the possessions that God gave him. He blasphemed the identity, but the Hebrew writer lets us know we don't see everything under his feet, but we do see somebody. We see Jesus. Now, in order to really get excited about this, you have to have some knowledge of what God desires to give you and what he desires to give you and what it cost him. It means nothing. The gift means nothing if you don't know what it costs. You can never appreciate Jesus if you never appreciate the price Jesus paid. And so what Jesus does here is something I want to correlate with ourselves as we talk about faith, family, and fellowship. I want you to read with me. Much more I can say. I want to hurry and get to this. But I want you to notice something that he says. He did not, this is verse 5, he did not subject to angels the world to come that we speak of. Heaven is not, let me just say it this way. The new heaven is not under the jurisdiction of somebody that can lose it. Adam lost it. He lost the former creation. The new creation is not under the jurisdiction of one that can lose it. You got to realize that Adam was given all of God's pleasure, all of God's inheritance, and he lost it when he sinned. You have a second Adam, or the last Adam, who has now all the inheritance. Notice, Adam lost all of it. He lost every bit of it. And Jesus would come to restore it. I don't have a man sitting next to God that is capable of failing. I don't have a man. I have a man as a king and God as a king that cannot fail. Now, the point they would understand about the land and the various jurisdictions, everything within the Old Testament that God gave can be lost. And it was. You don't have to worry about the lost. Now listen to what happened. Verse number 9. He says, but we do see him who was made for a little while lower than the angel. Now this is the rescue mission. What happened? Adam lost everything. Adam lost his crown. Adam lost his glory. Adam is dying. Adam is hurting. You are Adam. I am Adam. We are Adam. Adam, as our representative, lost everything we have. Adam, as our representative, caused us to begin to experience the pains of death. Adam, as our human spokesman, is the primary cause for all of the difficulties you and I face. Every tear you cry of pain is because of Adam. Everything you lose is because of Adam. Every pain I feel is because of Adam. And there was another Adam that saw that. Adam saw the whole human race hurting. All of the Adams are hurting. Every human being is in pain. Everybody is crying. Why are they crying? Because the God of this world, the devil, and death. He's going to deal with this in this text. We live in a world that is under the jurisdiction of the devil. That's this world. Now, he has a world that's under his jurisdiction that he's trying to get us to. But he has to deal with the situation. What's the situation? People are dying. People are hurting. People are crying. People are suffering. What are you going to do, God? I'm going to enter that climate. I'm not going to just sit back and watch people cry, watch people hurt, watch people suffer, watch people live in agony. I'm going to do something about it. Jesus is the prototype of faith. He is the one we should model. Watch the text. So what happened, Jesus? What happened, Hebrew writer? He saw people suffering death. And he was crowned with glory and honor, and so that he may, by the grace of God, taste death for everyone. Now, I want you to see the two crowns. There's two crowns here. God crowned Adam early in the chapter. What did he do? He crowned him with glory and honor and have appointed him over the works of your hands. You see what came as a result of Adam being crowned with glory and honor? You see that? Everything God made, Adam says, is yours. You see what's connected with the crown of glory and honor of Jesus Christ? He was appointed to die. Adam received an inheritance. Jesus received the call to death. Adam was appointed as a king. Jesus was appointed as a lamb to be slaughtered. Let me give you my topic. I was going to go through this. Imitating, here's my topic. Imitating the incarnation of Jesus. Imitating the incarnation of Jesus. Now, I know I may have to define for some incarnation. Incarnation is simply this, is Jesus being made man. It's a doctrine we study relative to the humanity of Jesus Christ. It's called incarnation. It's him taking upon the human experience. Why did he take upon the human experience? We're talking about imitating the incarnation. Why did you do what you did, Jesus? Because I see people hurting. I see people dying. I hear people crying. I hear and see people suffering the pains of death. So what are you going to do, God? What are you going to do, Word Eternal? What are you going to do, Jesus? I'm going to allow myself to be appointed to death. I'm going to leave all of the comforts of the domain of heaven, and I'm going to come down and live in poverty so that another man may share my riches. And he says this. Let's read through this. I want to get a few thoughts. It was fitting for him, for whom all things and through whom are all things, listen to his purpose, in bringing many sons to glory, to perfect the author of their salvation through suffering. He says, for both he who sanctifies and those who are sanctified are all from one Father. For the rich reason he is not ashamed to call them brethren, saying, listen, I will proclaim your name to my brethren. In the midst of the congregation, I will sing praise to you. This is him entering into the human experience and revealing the Father to humanity. I'll just summarize it that way. I will put my trust in him, and behold, I and the children that God has given me. Listen, he says, therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, don't miss this, he himself likewise also partook of the same, that through death he might render powerless him who had the power of death, that is the devil. Listen to his purpose. What are you trying to do, Jesus? What is your agenda in your incarnation? What is your agenda in your human experience? I am concerned about people dying. I am concerned about people experiencing death and all of its pain. What do you want to do then, Jesus? I want to eliminate the power of the devil and the power of death in their life. I have a genuine concern for my father and his children. I have a genuine love for my father and his creation. I have a sincere love. Everything else hangs on that. If I don't have a love for God and the love for humanity, I'm not moved by people dying. Jesus is moved by people dying. Jesus is moved by people hurting. Jesus is moved by tears. Jesus is moved by the agonizing struggle of humanity. And so he moves. What do you do, Jesus? I'm going to leave my comfort zone. And I'm going to come down and live in poverty. I'm going to let them put me on the cross. Because I know that it's only through my dying I can set them free and give them power over the devil and death. Does this make sense? That's what he did. We got to imitate this incarnation. This is what we have to imitate. I know. We don't like to be uncomfortable. Our pursuit in life is comfort. We're fighting for retirement. We're looking for the moment that we can sit back and begin to just fill our bucket list. That's what we live for. We live for that day. We live for comfort, and we do everything we can to try to avoid the pitfalls of life. We try to find every other means to satisfy our own personal mental sanities, and we are incapable of helping anybody else. We use every other means outside of Jesus, and we expect to be able to use Jesus to help other people. He's not helping us. How do you expect to give him to somebody and he don't work for you? He's going to deal with this in this text also. He's going to deal with it. In order to be able to experience the pains of the people, I have to taste the pains of the people while at the same time not being tempted. Let me make sense out of that. Listen, he says, what's the problem, Jesus? Humans are suffering. So what are you going to do, Jesus? Suffer with them? Why are you going to do that? Watch text. Because I want to deal with death. When I say death, I want to be clear that the Hebrew writer uses it in two ways. Death, you and I live in a dead world. We experience death. Whenever you feel that pain in your back, that's because you live in a dead world. Whenever you have to go to the hospital to deal with your issues, that's because you live in a dead world. Anytime you cry because somebody dies, that's because you live in a dead condition. Jesus saw that. And he wants to eliminate the power source, death and the devil. You know who got control over humanity right now? The God of this world. You know why people can't find peace? Because they don't have the giver of peace. But guess who's supposed to give them and introduce them to the Prince of Peace? But how can I introduce them to the Prince of Peace when my life is in shambles? I'm not even stable. Watch the text. He says, what do you want to do, Jesus? Verse 15, and might free those who through fear of death were subject to slavery all their lives. For surely he does not give help to angels, but he gives help to the descendants of Abraham. Therefore, listen to the incarnation language. What's the incarnation? Jesus being made like man, Jesus being made like human. Listen, he taking up on the human experience, dealing with your struggles also. I want to clearly make that point. Jesus came down and he felt everybody's pain. That's going to be very important within this text. There is no way I can help somebody that I can't sympathize with. This is why mercy and compassion is so important. Before I begin to condemn and reject and refuse, maybe I need to get to know. See, we easy at condemning. We easy at judgment, at being judgmental. We easy at that. That's easy. It takes work to sit in a room with somebody who's struggling and listen and try to feel the pulse of their heart. But Jesus did. Jesus did it. That's exactly what he did. Let me just finish reading the text with my time. Oh, good. He says, he had to be made like his brethren in all things. Why? So that he might become a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God. There was no way that Jesus could save me if he didn't know what he was saving me from. Somebody will say sin. It is sin. But all of its effects also. See, sin may not affect me like it affects you. We got two different contexts that he has to address. Your struggle ain't my struggle. He has to know how to deal with both of us. So what are you going to do, Jesus? I'm going to come down and I'm going to live everybody's experience. You know why I'm sitting with prostitutes and tax collectors? You know why I'm doing it? Because I'm listening. I'm trying to figure out how to help them. It's a whole lot easier to condemn somebody that's up that state to hell than it is to help them. Whole lot easier. We'll sit back and we'll count people as lost. And we never got to know them. You want the doctor to tell you what's wrong with you? Help me with my issue. That's the very reason why Jesus came to help you with your issue. And the Hebrew writer is pointing this depiction of Jesus and what he did. What are you doing with it, Brother Armstrong? I'm applying it to us. Because Jesus is the prototype of faith. If Jesus teaches love God and love neighbor, and upon these hang all the commandments, Jesus, you got to teach me how this done. I will. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. What are you going to do? I'm going to look at hurting people, and I'm going to make myself available to help them. Even if that involves me getting out of my comfort zone. I'm going to humble myself and not think on the things of myself only, but I'm also going to think of the things of others. Because this mission of God ain't just about me. It's about God and the entire human family. So what does he say? Watch the text. Ain't no way I can be a faithful and merciful high priest if I don't know what you're struggling with. Everybody, the one church is right. But everybody ain't ready to hear that right now. Everybody ain't ready for baptism yet, even though baptism is essential. Sometimes you may have to sit with that homosexual and help him out of that homosexuality by helping him see the one that came down from heaven. It may be then that he'll be like those in Acts chapter 2. Tell me, What do I need to do? I find it interesting in Matthew chapter 4 that Jesus went about Galilee teaching and preaching in their synagogue and healing every kind of disease and ailment and epilepsy. Jesus was not only concerned about preaching and teaching, he was also concerned about helping. We want to preach and teach, but we're not too big on helping. We're not too big on being benevolent. We're not so big on taking time to entertain and embrace people who are struggling. But he was. And that affected his mercy. Watch the text. He says, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. Listen, here it is. For since he himself was tempted, and that which he has suffered, he is able to come to the aid of those who are tempted. Why is he able to aid other people? Because he felt their pain. We can't help people that we don't know. Baptism don't stop their crying. Jesus does. But the people of Jesus need to give the people Jesus and not eliminate the baptism. We want to baptize with no help. Does this make sense? Let's do a few things. But I want you to see that Jesus is able to help because he becomes acquainted. He gets to know. In the book of 2 Chronicles, I think it's 2 Chronicles, 1 Chronicles 12:32, there are these sons called the sons of Issachar. And they were familiar with the times, and they knew what to teach in Israel. What's the point being made? Before they taught anything, they got to know who they were teaching. And they knew the hearts and the minds and the effects of sin in everybody's life. They learned how to diagnose everybody's issue. That takes work. That takes time. That takes energy. That takes effort. That can be discomforting. That can be sacrificial. But is that not what the incarnate God did? Live the life of discomfort so that he can share with all of humanity the comforts in heaven at a time only known to the mind of his Father. Am I making any sense? In the book of 1 Corinthians, just give you a few cross references. Let me tell you that show you that others embraced this reality of imitating the incarnation. Others embraced it also. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I'll go here with you. 1 Corinthians 9, watch this. Just want to give you a few case studies for you to consider. But because everybody who was successful in ministry recognized that the prototype, the model that Jesus set for loving God and loving man, however he did that, that is how it is supposed to be done. If Jesus made himself a man to eliminate or deal with the power of the devil and death, having gotten to know everybody he was dealing with, it would stand to reason, if that model is effective, that other people would follow it. Did that make sense? So Paul in his teaching, in 1 Corinthians 9:19, he says, "For though I am free from all men, I have made myself a slave to all, so that I may win more." I can read this whole section. There's a few other passages I want to give you. But you can read 1 Corinthians 9. What are you saying, Paul? If it was a Jew, I became like a Jew. If it was a Gentile, I became like a Gentile. Whatever I needed to do within my own specific context, I did, so that I may become acquainted with the people. But why, Paul? Because I'm trying to save them. Why did Jesus do what he did? And why did God embrace humanity? Because he was trying to get a taste of what people were dealing with, so he can help them out of it. Paul said, I did the same thing. Whatever environment I was in, I never compromised truth. But I'm going to walk into this environment. I'm going to learn how to deal and talk with these people. I'm not coming in condemning. Yeah, I see you sitting there with your bottle of Coors Light on your table. I'm not going to condemn that yet. That may be problematic, but I ain't got to deal with that right now. Because that is a symptom of a greater problem. That's only a symptom of a heart. Something going on within you that makes you think you need that. And so I need to figure out what that is. Well, you know, the Bible said drunkenness is sin. There is a reason why he thinks that bottle is okay. That's what I need to find out, because when I get to that, I ain't got to worry about that bottle. He's going to throw that bottle away. I got to learn how to diagnose issues. What do you say, Paul? I become all things to all men. I'm not approving of it, but I need to figure out how to help him throw it away. Does that make sense? Let's give you another case. Go to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians. Watch this text. Watch the text. 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Watch this. Watch this. Powerful one here. I like this one. I like this one. Watch this one. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. Listen to the text. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 3. Listen, he said, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort." Listen. "Who comforts us in all of our afflictions, so that we will be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the same comfort which we ourselves are also comforted by God." See the community effort? See the community effort? Everybody's comforting one another with the same comfort they draw from the same place. Everybody's helping one another with the same help they getting from the same place. The whole community is doing that. Listen to the text. He says, "For just as the sufferings of Christ are ours in abundance, so also our comfort is abundant through Christ. But if we are afflicted, it is for your comfort and salvation. If we are comforted, it is for your comfort, which is effective in the patient enduring of the same sufferings which we also suffer. And our hope for you is firmly grounded, knowing that as you are sharers of our sufferings, so also you are sharers of our comfort." You see the reciprocity? Everybody is comforting. Everybody is helping. Everybody's sharing the same stuff. What do y'all get a type of concept is this? What do you learn something like that? The same Jesus that suffered for me on Calvary is the same Jesus that comforts me when I'm on my own cross. And I have to learn to help people bear their cross, but I first need to learn how to carry my own. Does that make sense? We can't help anybody eliminate their cross because we don't want to bear our own cross. Everybody wants to sit in comfort. Nobody wants to struggle. Nobody wants the agony that deals with dealing with the devil and death. Sit back and wonder why nothing changes. Because we not. Make sense? Verse 8 says, "For we do not want you to be unaware, brethren, of our afflictions which came to us in Asia, that we were burdened excessively beyond our strength, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, we had the sentence of death within ourselves, so that we would not trust in ourselves, but in God who raises the dead." Who delivered us from so great a peril, and will deliver us. He, on whom we have set our hope, and he will yet deliver us. You also joining in helping us through your prayers, so that thanks may be given by many persons on behalf for the favor bestowed on us through the prayers of many. We're working through this thing together. God allowed them, like he did with Jesus. See, Hebrews 5 helps us to see that when Jesus was suffering in Gethsemane, he cried loud to the one that was able to save him. He was heard. But he learned to be obedient by the things he suffered. God trained him through that so that he may be your and my perfect Savior. He saved him. He allowed him to go through that agony to save you from yours. And he saved him from his to show you that he can save you from yours. And he gave you himself to save you from yours, but he also gave you himself so that you may help others be saved from theirs. He didn't give you himself for you to just hold him for yourself. He wants you to be like him and see people dying under the control of the devil with the desire to deliver them. One last verse. In Galatians 6. In Galatians 6. Here it is again. The same model. Galatians 6, he says this. Brethren, if anyone is caught in any trespass, you're reading King James, it says overtaken in a fault. It says, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in the spirit of gentleness. Each one look into yourself, so that you too will not be tempted. In the recovery process, in the restoring process, it's important to note that Paul is specific. See, what we know about Jesus is he was tempted, but he didn't sin. I should be able to enter a climate that is tempting and not break. I shouldn't always fall victim to temptation. Because there is a greater agenda from the perspective of God. The temptation is used as a training mechanism. But see, when I'm not spiritual, the temptation going to always get me. But when I am spiritual, I'm not immune to falling. But I have a well of information I can turn to. So while I'm in the process, Jesus, of helping other people, I recognize there may be moments that I may be tempted while I'm trying to help somebody that's been overtaken. I need to be mindful of my own humanity and make sure I have a well of information within me when I'm encountering other people, putting myself in places that could be tempting. Everybody ain't fit to deal with those who've been overtaken. Because some folk will not just be tempted, they're going to give in to the temptation. What do you say, Paul? All them people, the brothers, rather, who's been overtaken in a fault, I don't need the whole church going. Because everybody in the church ain't spiritual. I need them spiritual folk going to deal with them folk that are overtaken. Recognizing that they're not immune. See, it's when I know I'm not immune. It's when I know I can fall. It's when I know I can fall victim. It's when I make sure when I enter this climate, I'm ready to deal with whatever comes at me. I become another word in the flesh. So when I walk through the human existence and Satan throws his darts at me, he tries to give me the kingdoms of this world. He tempts me. He challenges my identity. He tempts me. He challenges me to tempt God. He tempts me. I can sit in my wilderness while you tempted me. And I'm tempted. But I also know what's written. I know what's written. And I can refer to the well that's in my spirit. Let's bring all this to a close. Let me close this out. The Hebrew writer is careful to point out that Jesus Christ is the prototype of faithfulness. He is the example. There is no greater example than him. One of the many things he did was express his love for God, his Father, and for God's people. How was that love expressed in his incarnation? What did he do? He saw people hurting, and he cared. Jesus even said himself, I didn't come to judge, I came to save. Now, judgment is coming, but salvation comes first. When I enter the world, I'm offering a way out of judgment. I'm offering you myself, but first, I need to get to know you so I can help you. When I get to know you, I can help you. May we be a people that recognize that if we're going to help anybody, we got to get to know people. Nobody is concerned about being baptized when they're at home being beaten. Do they need to be baptized? Yes. Do they need to come to the family of God? Amen. But how do I help them out this situation? Or do I care to help them out the situation? Or do I just want to put them in the water and leave them alone? Is that how Jesus did you and me? Make sense? Let me quit by saying this. We have to imitate the incarnation of Jesus. Everything he did, we also Must do. And it's not a matter of a buffet where I can choose whether or not to do that. It's no choice. Some interesting language in the text where he describes the offspring of God as his children. The Father's children all take on the same identity, same responsibilities, same role. Whatever the head of the family does, everybody in that family does. But that Savior died for you. He heard you crying. He heard you struggling, not just with your physical maladies, but with your spiritual malady. He heard you crying. He heard you not just crying. He wanted to know why you were crying. And he came down and he sat at the table with you. Guarantee you, if you were to look at that table at Matthew's house, I guarantee you sitting there. Just go there and spend some time at Matthew's table. You sitting there. Somebody at that table just like you. And Jesus listening to them all talk. So he can help them while at the same time seeing you in them. Because there will come a time when he's going to have to help you just like he had to help Judas. Just like he had to help Peter, Bartholomew, and Thaddeus, and Thomas, and Luke, all of them. Everybody's sitting at that table. When he's been accused of sitting with tax collectors and sinners, you know who he's sitting with? He's sitting with me. And I'm glad, as Luke records, that he received sinners. He opened his table for me. Not for me to stay a sinner, but he can listen to this sinner talk. He can learn what that sinner needs so he can make that sinner a saint. He did that for all of us. You need to hear that good news and believe it. Be willing to repent and be willing to be baptized into Christ, into his family, into the divine atmosphere. Become a citizen of God's kingdom. That's why he died. That's why he came for you, so that he can bring you to himself and to his family, so that his family can engage themselves with Christ and the Spirit and the gospel of saving the whole community. But you may be here and within the community, and you recognize that I have not been living a life that imitates the incarnation. And you really want to. Begin today. Begin today. Live in that incarnate life. Be like Jesus in every way. Love God. Love your fellow man. Look at the prototype of faith, and that's Jesus. Don't love just in word and tongue, but in deed and in truth. Think about your soul and this salvation as we stand. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.